Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Arielle Cates. I'm the Director of Programming at Village Preservation, and I'm so glad that you're here with us this evening. Just a quick bit about Village Preservation. We have been documenting, celebrating, and fighting for the preservation of Greenwich Village, the East Village, and NoHo since 1980. We work to expand and extend landmark and zoning protections and stop inappropriate development, while also encouraging appropriate development in our neighborhoods. We host roughly 75 programs a year, most of which are free and open to the public. Our events are meant to illuminate the cultural and architectural heritage, history and depth, and the value of preservation in our communities. We are a nonprofit membership-based organization, so your involvement and support mean the world to us. You can learn more at our website, villagepreservation.org, and please consider becoming a member or making a donation if you're able, especially as we approach the end of the year at villagepreservation.org/donate. So just a bit of Zoom protocol. Me and my wonderful colleague Hugh will not be visible during the talk, but we are here. So please feel free to use the chat to say hi, tell us where you're joining from, or to raise any issues or thoughts that come up. If you have questions for our speaker specifically, please do just use the Q&A function. It helps us to keep track of everything. You can do that at any point during the talk, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. We're also going to have a bit of an unusual end to our event this evening with some writing prompts. So get something to write with, if you please. We're going to do a little bit of that together. I will let Kate say more about that. So I am very delighted to introduce tonight's speaker. Kate Walter is the author of Looking for a Kiss, a chronicle of downtown heartbreak and healing. And the topic of tonight's, The topic of tonight's program, her book, Behind the Mask, Living Alone in the Epicenter. Kate's essays and opinion pieces have appeared in the New York Times, Newsday, the New York Daily News, AM New York, Next Avenue, the Village Sun, and many other outlets. Kate taught writing at NYU and at CUNY for 3 decades. She has documented
30 years.
30 years, 3 decades, yes. Walter has documented her life in downtown Manhattan since 1975 and has been dubbed the world's Samuel Pepys. Kate, thank you so much for being here. Take us away.
Hi, Ariel. I'm glad to be here and happy to talk about my book. I'm not sure whether you wanted me to read. I think you did. But let me tell you a little bit about how this came about. When New York City went into lockdown in March 2020, I kind of freaked out, as a lot of people did. And in order to keep myself from going crazy and being too lonely, because I'm single and I live alone, I started writing about this. And then I started sending the pieces to my editor, Lincoln Anderson, at the Village Sun, who most of you in the Village know. And Lincoln started publishing them. And people started really responding like, wow, you're really nailing it. You're expressing what I'm going through, etc. So then I kept writing them for the rest of the year. And then I think it was a friend of mine, I think it was Candy Schulman, who teaches at the New School, who said, Kate, I think you're writing a memoir and essays. And I was like, yeah, I'm writing a memoir and essays. So then I pitched it to my publisher, Naomi Rosenblatt from Heliotrope Books, who published my previous memoir last December. And then she said, yes, let's do it. Let's do this book. So then she gave me a deadline of June 2021. So then I had another 6 months or so to finish the book. And of course, you know, I knew where it began. It began with the lockdown. I didn't know where it ended. I thought maybe it will end with the getting the vaccine. But then I thought, no, it has to end with our kind of getting back to normal. And then of course, everything got thrown for a loop when the Delta variant came in. So the book goes from March 2020 to May 2021, when we thought everything was okay. And then I had to write a postscript. And of course, as we know, this is ongoing. So I'm going to start by reading the first chapter, and then I'm going to jump ahead and I'll read from the end of the book. So the first chapter is called Westbeth Feels Like a Ghost Town, My Life Shut Down. And it just Chronicles every day something new goes away. March 2020. The community room is closed. The gallery is dark. The spring flea market has been postponed. The community room and the gallery are the heart and soul of Westbeth Artists Housing. Everyone looks forward to shopping at the busy flea market in the basement. The maid lobby, normally bustling with activity and conversation, feels like a morgue. Management recently issued a memo that residents should only use the lobby for essential activities, no hanging out. I really feel bad for the seniors with mobility issues who use the lobby as a place to sit on a bench and socialize. Thankfully, it will get warm soon and they will be able to go outside into the courtyard. Westbeth is a NORC, a naturally occurring retirement community with many senior citizens in their 70s and 80s. Whenever I go to the lobby to pick up my mail, I pass what my neighbor calls the death board, where people post a photograph or a notice of a resident who just died. Some are expected, some are shocking. 2 years ago, a friend my age, a brilliant percussionist, had a heart attack while walking in the park. I worry about how COVID will impact Westbeth. It's hard to believe that only 2 weeks ago, I gave a reading with 3 other writers in the community room. Over 50 people attended. I read the first chapter of a novel in progress and everyone told me they liked it and wanted to know about what would happen next. We mingled and chatted and drank champagne. The feedback was super encouraging, just what I needed. It was the kind of interaction that makes Westbeth a great place for artists to live. I've been a resident here since 1997. One of the best things about this complex is all the free and inexpensive activities that take place in the community room: classes, readings, concerts, puppet shows for the kids. Under the auspices of the Westbeth Artists Residents Council, I often write in my gratitude journal, I'm grateful to live in Westbeth. Now everything is on hiatus. I love the chair yoga class on Monday taught by the gifted Jennifer Gibson, who trains at Integral Yoga Institute. It really helped me cure my sciatica. I totally look forward to the sing time sessions every Friday taught by the talented jazz singer and Westbeth resident Eve Zani. I've been a member of the Bliss Singers for over 2 years and made friends from inside and outside the building. At our last meeting on March 13th, we sat apart from each other but sang our hearts out. Eve reassured us she'd send us music videos so we could practice our repertoire at home. Isaac Roz, our amazing pianist, dazzled us with his solos on Swing, Swing, Swing. We ended the session with a heartfelt, "We shall overcome." I was almost crying when I said goodbye to my classmates with the now typical farewell. Stay safe. As I left the community room, I thought of that famous short story by Alphonse Daudet, The Last Class. It's a tearjerker that made a big impression on me when I read it in college in a world lit class, especially since I have Alsatian ancestry. It's about the last class taught in French after the Germans took over the region called Alsace-Lorraine. Now the virus was taking over my classes. Losing all these activities is a major blow for someone like me who is single and lives alone. I'm a very outgoing social person who really likes interacting with people. Adding to my social isolation, my church, Middle Collegiate, has stopped in-person worship and is going virtual. When I last went to church, I wondered how we would pass the peace to our neighbors. Instead of shaking hands, we bumped elbows or put our hands in the prayer position to nod to our neighbors. That was Sunday, March 8th. Then I got a message that services would be streamed, and the following Sunday, I watched from home. The current situation at Westbeth is very different than other disasters we weathered together. Along with my neighbors, we survived 9/11, watching the horror from our rooftop. We survived Superstorm Sandy, which flooded our basement and knocked out electricity. We carried food and water up the stairs, but those disasters brought us together as we helped our neighbors. The virus forces us apart. But one thing is similar. The calmness and professionalism of our hardworking staff at Westbeth are reassuring. I so appreciate my neighbors being really friendly and saying, "Hey, Kate, how are you doing?" Of course, there's so much uncertainty. No one knows if things will get better or worse with the virus. No one knows for sure if and when things will resume. The key word seems to be postponed, not canceled. I'm usually happy when it's spring, but this year I'm feeling depressed and lonely. I know things could be worse. Other than being over 70, I'm not in any of the high-risk groups for the virus. I can still enjoy walking outside and going to the green market, and soon I will plant my garden outside in Bethlehem Street. That'll cheer me up. I'm trying to look on the bright side of everything being canceled. Being stuck in my apartment gives me time to finish my novel. I have no excuses now. If I manage to survive this virus without getting sick, I will still suffer from anxiety, boredom, and social isolation. I already miss getting hugs from my friends. I miss the interaction of being with people. I know things could be worse. I have a nice sunny apartment with food, wine, books, music, but I'm lonely. I'm a member of the Whitney Museum and visited on March 10th. I planned to meet a friend there a few days later, but now it's closed. I went to my writing group last week, but we are shifting to meeting online. The Strand bookstore notified me I was getting a refund for 2 canceled meetings. The New York Public Library, my second home, is closed. Restaurants and bars are also shutting down. My life was going well until a few weeks ago. I'm happily retired from college teaching. Now I'm extra grateful I left because I never wanted to teach online. I'm a people-oriented person who liked interacting in the classroom. I love being out and about. Now I'm stuck. All this is depressing. I feel like I need an extra therapy session, but the virus has helped me to put things in perspective, especially my minor health issues. Things I worried about a few weeks ago seem relatively minor, like a funky crown that needs to be repaired, a sciatica that responded to acupuncture and yoga. Should I bother sticking to my blood pressure and cholesterol reducing diet? Why deprive myself of things I love like eggs, cheese, and potato chips? I want comfort food. Of course, I'm being careful. Washing my hands like crazy, not hitting the elevator buttons with my fingertips. I use my knuckles. Not touching door handles. I use my elbows. But there are so many things that we touch. I freaked out in the supermarket when I tapped the button on the credit card machine to hit enter. I now wear plastic gloves when I go to the store. I'm grateful to be a healthy older person who walks 2 to 3 miles a day. At least walking in Hudson River Park has not been canceled. Okay, so that's the first chapter. That's March 2020 when boom, 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 everything shuts down. Now I'm going to jump to the end of the book. This is one of the chapters at the end. It's like the next to the last chapter. It's called Getting Back Out There. I'm going to read parts of it, not the whole thing. This is from spring 2021. This is after I've been vaccinated, etc. I started a campaign to refresh my life. I invited friends and neighbors and colleagues to see the exhibit, Westbeth at 50. I always wanted to be a tour guide, so this was my chance. But it was more than that. Giving tours became the gateway to reopening my life. We met in the courtyard and I guided my guests through the display of the giant photos as I talked a little bit about each artist. Then we went inside the lobby to view the other shows. I never took more than 2 visitors on my sightseeing trips and we all wore masks. I had fun, something that had been missing in my life. As I narrated the visit to my building, I appreciated how lucky I was to be living in Westbeth. I gave 8 informal tours. Friends popped over from the East Village and the West Village, even from New Jersey. Then we went to lunch or had a drink. People hugged me when they arrived and when they left. Hugs and company. This had not happened in a long time. 2 colleagues came down from the Upper West Side. I met Elizabeth and Becky in a Zoom group for writers formed during the pandemic. Although we'd interacted for months, we'd never met in person and only seen each other from the waist up. They came to my apartment and we chatted for about half an hour. Then I took them on the tour and we went out for chai lattes. Elizabeth seemed much more relaxed in person than on the Zoom calls. Becky was skinnier than I'd imagined, and she thought I'd be taller. I'm 5'5". It was a lovely afternoon. I felt like I was making new friends, an unexpected perk of Zooming. When my friend Kathleen came in from Princeton, she peppered me with questions about the history of Westbeth. Later, she treated me to lunch at Mamay on Hudson Street, and we discussed potential plans for the July 4th weekend at Ocean Grove. We'd met there many years ago when we stayed at the same guest house in this weird Victorian town. After lunch, I took my friend on an improvised tour of the quaint winding streets of the historic Greenwich Village. We walked along West 4th Street to Sheridan Square, then across Grove Street, back to Hudson. You live in such a beautiful neighborhood, she observed as we strolled past the cherry tree in bloom. We finished with a rest stop in the gardens of St. Luke's in the Fields. Spring was magnificent this year. The azaleas were dazzling. The tulips looked bigger and brighter. Was it because it snowed this past winter? That's supposed to be good for bulbs. Or maybe my perception was different as my state of mind improved. Last spring I rushed in and out during the lockdown. I was too freaked out to appreciate the flowers. My improvised tours were a hit. I got rave reviews. We enjoyed ourselves tremendously. Nice to see Westbeth in your West Village. I'm giving your tour 5 stars. I went by myself to the Westbeth Gallery, but not to see art. I was donating blood again, a civic gesture I started doing during the pandemic. It was an easy way to help my fellow New Yorkers, and I had an uncommon blood type that was in demand, B negative. Setting up the blood bank in the community room was a creative use of our community space. But I had flashbacks. Donors checked in at the desk where in the past, I signed the guest book for the artist show. I was directed to a computer to answer questions and then had vital signs taken. My temperature and blood pressure were normal and my iron was good, all set. As I lay there in a reclining chair watching my blood go into the bag, I recalled the many good times at various openings. The chairs for donors were set up near the area where our resident bartender once served wine and soda. I felt a little sad when I looked at the empty walls, and I hoped the gallery would reopen in the fall. Okay, this is the last section I'm going to read. This is from the same chapter. I usually had lunch at the bus stop cafe, but I wanted to support another local diner. I knew La Bombonniere had barely survived the pandemic. Their not accepting credit cards did not help the situation. I was sitting at a table set up on the sidewalk. It wasn't a formal sidewalk cafe. My chair was bumping against a delivery bike locked to a street sign. My waitress, an older Latina woman, maybe late 50s, was very friendly as I asked about the inexpensive lunch menu. I ordered a Coke and an eggplant parm sandwich, which was really good. Later, when she gave me the check, she told me she'd worked there for 30 years. While I waited for my food, I overheard her talking to a couple who walked past. They obviously knew each other, and the couple was happy to run into the chatty server. My ears perked up when I listened to the conversation. "I got the vaccine," said the waitress, all excited. "I got the Pfizer, and I feel young. It made me feel like a tiger." The couple started laughing, and the woman said, "You were always a tiger." The waitress replied, "But now I'm a young tiger." Now I was laughing too. I love the idea of the vaccine as the fountain of youth. She told the couple she got the vaccine in that new place, the one that used to be St. Vincent's Hospital. She was referring to Northwell Health on 7th Avenue, housed to one of the old St. Vincent's building. The rest was turned into condos. As she mentioned the vaccination site, I remembered going to Northwell last spring at 7 o'clock during the height of the pandemic, standing outside with my neighbors and cheering the healthcare workers. I also recalled walking past the refrigerated trucks on the side street next to the small hospital across from the AIDS Memorial. This was the second plague I had lived through in New York City. I think I need to stop reading, but I could read more if you want. It's up to you guys.
I would love to hear that, and I also would love to hear you talk about you're just drawing a parallel between these two plagues. I'm curious to hear a bit more about that.
Well, okay. Should I read a little more, or should I talk about the two plagues?
It's up to you.
Well, I could read. Okay. All right. I think I'll read. Well, I'm kind of losing my reading voice, so I think I'll just talk if that's okay. Talking about the two plagues. Well, I lived here during the AIDS epidemic. I lost a lot of friends. My ex-boyfriend, who came out as gay, I'm gay too, he died of AIDS. One of my several colleagues died of AIDS. Various editors. It seemed like every time I turned around, someone I knew had AIDS and was sick or dying. And of course, it was fatal back then. Once you had it, it was like a death sentence. I mean, at least with COVID, most people I know got better. So I guess in some ways, AIDS was almost more devastating because it was a death sentence. I had several friends who got COVID and relatives, and they all recovered. But there was that same sense of it was all over. And I think COVID was much more scary because I didn't think I was going to get AIDS. I mean, I kind of knew I wasn't going to get AIDS. It wasn't transmitted through the air. So how would I get AIDS? But COVID was so scary because you could just get it from the air. So it felt scarier.
A lot of sense. I would love to hear a little bit more about the process of writing the book and the ways that sort of, you told me a little bit when we talked before about sort of the arc of the book and how you were thinking about that and how you wrote it sort of through the different stages of the pandemic. Can you tell us a little? I mean, don't give too much away. Everyone should buy the book. I'm putting the link in the chat right now. Also, go to your local bookstore. in the
It's
village. And
unfortunately, it's not in bookstores. It's hard to get
well
home to
then
bookstores, so you got to buy it online.
definitely
But
buy the
hint,
book
hint, if any
online.
local bookstores want to carry it, I'd be happy to get it to you.
That's great. Yeah, don't, without giving away too much, tell us about sort of, your bigger picture.
Well, as I said earlier, I didn't know I was writing a book until one of my colleagues said, I think I might have discussed it and said, maybe I've got a book. And Candy said, oh, you've got a book. So I, contacted my publisher, Naomi, and she said, I like it. And then that was in December, a year ago. So this book was written very quickly, but I already had a lot of it written when I contacted her. But then I went back, and then when we decided I was going to have a book and it was going to be due in June, of course, I continued writing as things went along with the intention of them going in the book. And I didn't publish everything. Once I had sold the book, I was like, I don't want to publish too much. I want to have some stuff that's fresh. So some of the stuff in the spring was never published on purpose. And then the other thing that was happening was I went back because I realized now there were some things that happened before I had talked to my publisher that I didn't write about, such as the day Biden won, which is one of my favorite essays in the book.
Oh,
so
wow.
I had to go back, and maybe I'll read that one. Okay, so I had to go back and add that. Okay, so yeah.
So there's the pandemic, there's the politics, there's Westbeth. I mean, how has Westbeth been? Have neighbors been caring for each other? What's it been like there?
Well, as I said, it was completely different than Sandy, which really devastated Westbeth. We had no electricity, we had no running water, we had no heat. But I mean, during Sandy, we were all helping each other, the people who stayed, running up and down the stairs, carrying things. But we couldn't. I mean, we had strict orders from the building, one at a time in the elevator. We're used to having this packed elevator with a lot of conversation and sharing gossip. So then it became two in an elevator and masked. And even outside, it was kind of like keep your distance. So, I mean, you couldn't really have much of a conversation. I have one chapter called Brief Encounters of the Pandemic Kind, which was like how I would look forward to these like little interactions of, talking to someone for 2 minutes.
Totally.
And how if I ran into someone I knew who I didn't know, like I ran into my friend Michelle at the AIDS Memorial and her husband, and we just talked, and I was just so thrilled to run into people. It was like exciting. I mean, I had a whole different experience because I live by myself. I think if you had a partner or you lived with a family, it was different, But I'm saying, okay, what Westbeth did was, okay, at the very beginning, and I mentioned this, before we went into lockdown, there was a meeting, and I was invited to the meeting. I don't think everyone was invited because they didn't want to panic. So I was invited, and then they asked people to volunteer to be floor captains. So I volunteered to be a floor captain for my section of the 8th floor. So what we did was we were basically kind of the liaison between, Westbeth formed an emergency committee, okay, to deal with the pandemic. I think it had during Sandy too, so we had experience. So the floor captains, we were sort of the in-between person between the board and the council and the committee and the tenants. So if there was a memo that went out, I mean, everybody got the memo, but there were, like, for example, people on my floor, older people who didn't have computers, okay? So my job as the floor captain was to print out the information for these 4 or 5 apartments and put them in their door. And I remember at the very beginning, I was like scared. I was like afraid to like touch people's doors. It was like, looking back, it seems ridiculous, but
we didn't know though.
We didn't know. Put it in the door and run away, And then we had some other things that were very nice. We had these food deliveries that came through Corey Johnson's office, and Eric, who's now our city council person, he was kind of in charge of that. And we got all these food deliveries to the community room, and people volunteered to drop them off. And I didn't do that, but if you wanted a food delivery, the person would come to your door and they told you in advance, we're not going to talk to you, we're just going to ring the bell and step back. And it was like, whoa, so it was very much stay away. And that was like so different because Westbeth is a very, buzzy, friendly place. And that's coming back. I mean, the gallery's open, the community room is open. So that's all good.
I'm glad. So Jay is in the chat, and folks, if y'all have questions or thoughts or anything like that you want to share, please do feel free. Jay was wondering, just looking for some more context on Westbeth. And
Okay, well,
yeah,
you can go to the website to get the history, but Westbeth is affordable housing for artists. It's in the Far West Village on the corner of West and Bethune Street. It opened in 1970. I've lived here about 25 years. It's not easy to get into at this point. There's a long waiting list. You have to wait a long time. You have to be vetted as an artist. You have to qualify financially, so you can't make too much money to get in. And there's a lot of events, and there's a lot of people here from almost every art form. Thank you. Painters, sculptors, filmmakers, photographers, writers, dancers, theater people, musicians. I'm sure I've left somebody out. But almost every artistic field you can think of is represented. And what was I? So yeah, so Westbeth has been around a long time. So for a place like that no, it's not noisy. So for a place, unless you have a very loud neighbor, and how many units? Okay, I'm trying to look. I think there's 383 units. I mean, it takes up a whole city block. It's big, and I believe it's 11 stories. Ariel used to work in the gay synagogue, which was in Westbeth, so she's very familiar with Westbeth. So jump in, Ariel, if you want.
Beautiful and incredible labyrinth. And I was there also during Sandy. I worked there, and it was such a wild time. Just like, I remember everyone had their storage in the basement, and they had and the basement was flooded, and everyone was helping each other to bring all of their artwork up into the courtyard. And it was like so beautiful, and also
that was wild.
Yeah.
Well, the basement had something like 10, 11 feet of water, and the management told people, don't go down there, it's dangerous. But of course, people were completely freaked out because their studios were there. So they were like sneaking in, even though they were told, don't go there, you can't go there, it's dangerous. And then eventually, I guess people were, I don't know if they were allowed to go in to get their art. And as Ariel said, this art, which was all wet and damaged, was spread out in the courtyard. I have pictures. Because basically, I remember we got a memo that said, if you have any art that's on the floor, I mean, I didn't have a studio in the basement, put it on a table. We're expecting, maybe a little flooding, but I mean, it was flooded up to the ceiling. So everything was completely destroyed that was down there. So that was a huge loss. I mean, some people lost like their life's work practically. It was really sad. Yeah. And that has not been restored, those basement studios. So I don't know if that'll eventually come back. So people lost their work, and they lost their workspace. So the artists had to find a new place to paint. These were mostly visual artists.
Yeah. And so you came to Westbeth as a writer?
Yes.
And so talk a little bit about how this book compares to your other writing, and
I've always written personal essays. I've always written kind of columns. I wrote for AM New York for a long time. I was a columnist there for over 10 years, and then that kind of went away when Newsday owned AM New York. They sold it. I stopped working for them. My editor left. I also worked for The Villager for a long time, and then they fired my editor, Lincoln Anderson, who then started The Village Sun, which I now write for. So I've always kind of been writing about the neighborhood. Years ago, I wrote for New York Press. I've written for some of the major papers too, Times, the Daily News, but I always like to have a regular outlet, which is why I liked writing for these kind of more local papers, because I liked having a regular outlet for my comments about life in the neighborhood.
So great.
Well, I could read something else. I'm debating. I could read the day Biden was elected, or I could read about this party we had when the city reopened. I don't think I have the energy to read both. So should I read the day Biden won, or should I read, you know what, I'm going to read the day Biden won. I read that in the community room, and that seemed to be a hit.
That sounds great.
I was very happy. I had a reading in the Westbeth community room on December 1st. And it was a nice turnout, even though everyone, as I was telling Ariel earlier, everyone had to be vaxxed, everyone had to wear a mask. They let me take it off to read. But this seemed to go over. Okay, so this is one of the pieces that I don't think was ever published anywhere besides the book, because I wrote this after I got the book kind of contract, because I thought, there's some stuff I didn't write about. This is important. Okay. Now, the crazy thing was, I happened to be working in the garden across from the Stonewall Inn on the day we got the announcement that Biden won. Okay. I had volunteered to plant tulip bulbs, which is apparently an annual thing that every fall people plant tulip bulbs and then they pop up in the spring. So I had no idea, of course, this would be the day they called the election. So you couldn't imagine a better place to be than in Sheridan Square. So this is called the Day Biden Won, November 2020. The weather in Manhattan was warm on Saturday, November 7th, around 65 degrees. I woke up wishing I was at the beach house instead of in the city that weekend, but then I would have been in Trump land when the media announced Biden's victory. Looking back, I was so happy I had stayed in the village. That morning, I had volunteered to plant tulip bulbs in the Christopher Park, across the street from the Stonewall Inn. The park is now part of the Stonewall National Monument. I enjoy urban gardening, and there was nothing more to do with 2 boxes I tend outside my building. So I jumped at this opportunity to dig in the soil. As usual, I entertained the idea I might meet someone. I responded to a call for volunteers posted on a neighborhood website. I threw on my ratty jeans, old sneakers, a down vest, and walked over to Christopher Street. When I got to the park, I introduced myself to the head gardener, who was opening up boxes and boxes of tulip bulbs. I signed into the volunteer log, took a bottle of water, gloves, and a spade from a supply table. I was early and did a little cleanup. I picked up litter and threw it into a plastic bag, cans, bottles, candy wrappers. People were really slobs. Other gardeners started to arrive. They seemed to know each other, but this was my first time. I said hello, and then the head gardener assigned several of us to a southwest section of the park near 7th Avenue. We spaced out. Of course, we were all wearing masks. I knelt down in the soil and started digging and planting the tulip bulbs as instructed. Bending over like this was harder on my back than I expected, so I'd stand up to stretch and have a drink of water. The soil was muddy and my jeans were getting filthy. I was probably working a little over an hour when all of a sudden I saw a group of people whooping and shouting as they walked up Christopher Street past the legendary Stonewall Inn. "What happened?" asked another gardener who called out to them. "Biden won," they shouted back. "They called Pennsylvania." I dropped my spade and stood up and pumped my fist into the air and started screaming, "Yes, yes, yes." I was so happy and relieved. LGBTQ Americans would have support and recognition from the federal government, and all states could expect a smooth rollout of the vaccine. Sheridan Square had gotten busy since I'd arrived. It was Saturday morning, a gorgeous fall day. Locals were doing errands and going out for brunch. People walking by on 7th Avenue asked what happened. Word spread fast. Now cars and cabs and trucks were going down 7th Avenue honking their horns. A man stood in front of the Monster, a gay bar in the corner across from the park, and intoned solemnly like a newscaster, "Joseph R. Biden has just been declared the 46th president of the United States. Joseph R. Biden has just been declared the 46th president of the United States." People were going crazy as the word continued to spread. I couldn't manage a better place to be than in Sheridan Square in front of the Stonewall Inn in the heart of Greenwich Village when I heard this news. I worked for a bit longer, planting tulip bulbs, then getting up and clapping, planting and standing up, screaming and waving to the crowds. When I emptied out that box of bulbs, I decided to go home and get cleaned up. I handed in my gloves and spade and signed out. When I got back to the Far West Village, I saw crowds around the Green Market in Abington Square. People were yelling and clapping as cars headed up Hudson Street honking. A man standing on the corner in front of the farmer's market opened a bottle of champagne. A tap dancer in a tuxedo was working the crowd on the corner across from the market. I went home, took a shower, changed my clothes, charged my phone, and got ready to go out and party. This was the happiest I'd been since before the pandemic. Finally, I felt hopeful. I don't think I could have continued if Trump had won. I was seriously thinking of getting my EU citizenship. I qualified because my mother was born in Ireland. I could sublet my place and move as soon as I was able to travel. Now I could stay here in New York and in America, my home. I headed back to Sheridan Square. The block on Christopher Street in front of the Stonewall Inn was where we celebrated victories and mourned losses. Today was a huge victory. The street was now closed off to traffic and mass crowds were milling around. The bar had set up bistro tables outside and revelers with Biden-Harris signs and shirts were drinking and toasting a man and a woman, either a straight couple or two friends, each had a champagne bottle. They popped the cork simultaneously and swigged. The crowd roared. A huge stereo speaker was blasting music out of a window of a high-rise building next to the bar. I imagine this person was a frustrated DJ who had not worked in the last 8 months. Celebrate good times, come on, sang Cool and the gang. There's a party going on right here. Yes, it was a party, and we were here for it. At some point, maybe it was after Queen did We Are the Champions, the DJ segued into Sinatra singing New York, New York. How perfect, and we were so ready. When Frank built up to these little town blues are melting away, the crowd was waving and swaying as we anticipated the next few lines. Yes, we were all a part of it in New York, New York on this wonderful historic day. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to read, but happy to talk and take questions. I was so happy that I was there in New York that day by the Stonewall. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. I remember being in the Village when Obama got elected, and it was also like a big, for the first time, it's like a big celebration. So great. I was thinking, actually, yes, Jennifer, I agree. You did capture that day. So wonderful. I wonder if maybe now is a good time to do our writing prompts. And
okay, I don't want to lose anybody, but one of the things that I have in the book is I have 12 writing prompts. And,
yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about, how this developed? And
okay, well, yeah. I'll have to say I'm going to give credit to my publicist, who I see is here in the meeting, and she came up with this idea, Jen McGuire. She said, I don't know what brought this up, but she said, I guess because I talked so much about how writing was my salvation during the pandemic, and it really helped me analyze what I was going through. And she said, well, everyone should be writing about their feelings and analyzing them. And why don't you create some writing prompts? So, since I taught writing at NYU for 30 years, it was pretty easy for me to come up with writing prompts. And, we did free writing in my class sometimes. So I came up with 12 prompts. And the idea was that it's important to record what was going on during this unprecedented time. So I'm offering the prompts as a way to journal about your experiences. So I gave 12, and I'm going to throw out 2 right now. So if you want to write, do we want to do this now? Or do we want to wait to the end?
More of
okay, I mean, we don't have to process them or analyze them or critique this. I mean, this isn't a writing workshop. Okay, so everybody take out a pen or a pencil and a little notepad, and we're going to do free writing for like maybe 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. Okay. And I'm going to give 2. Obviously, you're going to just do 1. These are all things that I included in the book. All the prompts came from what I wrote about. So the way you do free writing, which some of you probably know, is you just write for 5 minutes and you don't stop, you don't read it, you don't correct it, you just keep going. And some people say, don't even take your pen off the page, but that's a little extreme. All right, so this just stuck in my mind so brilliantly. And so this is 1. I'll give you 2. Take 1. What was your last regular activity or fun event before going into lockdown mode? I think most people have a crystal clear memory of that, okay? That's 1 prompt. The other possibility is, what activities made you feel like your life was getting back to normal? When was this? Did you eat in a restaurant, attend an event, hug your grandkids? And I read, yeah, you don't have to write if you don't want to, but think about it. I read that section when my friends started to come over to my apartment. But the last regular activity for me was I had lunch at the B&H Dairy restaurant, and then I went to a writing workshop at my colleague Sue Shapiro's house. And that was, I think, the last time we met in person for like over a year. So either one of those. So just take a minute or 2 and think about, what was your last regular activity or fun event before you went into lockdown? Or what was the day or the activity that made you feel like things were coming back to normal? Happy writing for a few minutes, or thinking. Okay, perfect. How what? No more than 5 minutes.
About 4.
Perfect. Okay.
Nice even number.
Pick one of these prompts. Don't do both. Keep those pens moving.
Such an amazing opportunity to get to spend a little bit of time writing. I love it. Well, my timer has gone off.
Okay. So I suggest at some point you read back what you wrote, and this is what I would tell my students, and maybe expand it. Okay, I see people are popping in some stuff into the chat. I mean, you could totally write a whole essay about this. I mean, I basically did myself in the book, and all the prompts are things that I wrote about. I mean, they're all based on things that are in the book. I did see. Does anyone want to talk about their writing experience? Can if you want. I see people pop some in.
Yeah, it's so great. Agreed.
I did see some questions about Westbeth that people were asking. people were asking about the size of the places. I mean, they all really vary depending on family size. The place I'm in right now, as you can see, it's a loft. These big abstract paintings were done by someone who lived here, who has since passed on. My first place was very small. It was a little under 400 square feet. It was one of the smallest spaces in Westbeth. It was a studio. Then I got on an inside waiting list. I waited like a long time, over 10 years, to get a 1-bedroom, which is what I'm in now. And it's not quite 600 square feet, okay? So that's what Westbeth is about. It has to do with family size. So if you have kids, you would get a bigger space. If you're a married couple with a couple of kids, you'd get more space, or 2 people would get, more space than 1. That's pretty much how it works. And someone mentioned the light. I mean, I happen to have very, very good light, and that was important to me. When I moved from my studio to a 1-bedroom, that was like, I had my list, and light was important. Some people have studios, some places are dark if they face the inner courtyard. So not every place is light. It really depends on where you are. Some places have river views. That was not important to me, but it's nice to have a river view. So, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions about writing, about Westbeth, anything at all, how the book came about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious about how the book came out. And I'm also curious, I think this program is a little bit unusual for village preservation because a lot of our talks are focused on history that isn't as recent. And so I'm curious also if you have thoughts about, sort of like what it is like to record history in the moment that it's happening.
Well, I mean, I realized as I kept writing that, this was really an unprecedented time. We've never gone through anything like this. And again, different from the AIDS epidemic, everyone was affected by this. I mean, AIDS really mostly just affected the gay male community and, of course, IV drug users, but everyone was affected by COVID. And everybody knew someone who died, at least I think so. And everybody knew someone who got sick. I mean, I know people who died. I know people who got sick. Yes, I'll talk about heliotrope. Okay, and so it was much more bigger in that sense, historic, yes. Well, I do have one piece that's called Rooting for Hudson Street. And I remember it was in March after I'd been vaccinated and starting to get a little warm, I walked down Hudson Street and I was like happy because it was a nice day, the snow was melting. And then I was like, for sale, for lease, vacant, 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 vacant. I kind of like really a lot of empty storefronts when I walked from the corner of Bethune Street to West 10th Street. And that was kind of devastating. And the one that really killed us all in Westbeth was Golden Rabbit. We all love Golden Rabbit. I don't know if you know that store. It was like a little mom and pop, kind of like party store, stationery store. And all the people who had kids remember going there to buy the party supplies for their kids. And they were a really nice immigrant couple. And I think they had put their daughter through law school from running this business, which was amazing. And then when I saw it empty, it was devastating. And I remember thinking, how did they ever put all that stuff inside that little space? So that was like an anchor store. It had been there the whole time I had lived in Westbeth, and that's gone now. That closed. I don't know if it was the pandemic. I think it was. So then that got me speculating, what's it going to be like? Who's going to come back? What's going to go into those spaces? Again, I don't know. I'm speculating. So I think that part was kind of like history. And, I was sort of ruminating about Hudson Street, Jane Jacobs lived there, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was current. And the thing about writing about current is like, I thought the book had a beautiful ending to end in May when everything was coming back and the virus is on the run, and that's when it was going to end. And then the Delta variant came in. So we're editing the book over the summer. I'm going back and forth with Naomi, the publisher, and we're editing it and we're proofreading it. And then she said, I think you need to write a postscript. And I said, yeah, I need to write a postscript. And even that is probably outdated. I could write a postscript to the postscript because I wrote that during August. Now it's before Omicron. But I do remember there's a line in the postscript that says, when will this end? Will it ever end? And that's how I think we all feel. When will this end? Will it ever end? So there's this sense of, I mean, I had to end it somewhere, and I'm very happy that I chose to end it in May, because that was really like the March 2020 to May 2021.
Part one. Yeah.
Part one. We thought it was over. We really did. I think we all thought, oh my God, we can get back to normal. And then the Delta came in and we realized that's not happening. So I feel like I've captured this like very incredible time period in New York City, or specifically in Greenwich Village. I mean, my book totally takes place in the Village, except for my little jaunts to the Jersey Shore. But other than that, it's exclusively in the Village, the book.
Wow.
And any questions? Oh, someone asked me about Heliotrope Press, Lisa, right? Yes, Heliotrope Press is a very small independent press. It's based in the East Village. They've published a lot of interesting books. They published this genre they call memoir noir. And that's my first book was published by them, which was very different than this book. The first book was one of those books I spent years writing and editing and going over and over. And this book was put out very quickly, although I did, workshop and edit a lot of it. So Heliotrope is a small press. So I don't know what else to say about that. It's different than writing for a big press, obviously. I don't know what else. Does anyone want to ask me something specific about it? But it's great to work with a small press, because we had a lot. I had like total control over the cover, and that, by the way, is a selfie. And
Wow.
And the reason that I took that was because, I don't know if my sister's here, but she knitted that hat. This is the hat that I'm wearing. Okay, my sister, no, sorry, she crocheted it. And I was walking down Hudson Street last November, a year ago, November, and I said, oh, this hat looks cute. I want to take a picture to show it to my sister because she made it for me. So she'll get to see how it looks. So again, I hadn't even know this is before I even sold the book. So after I sold the book, I said, what do I have that could be the cover? And the other thing I like about the book is that it has photos, which I took. They're mostly black and white, and Naomi took a few. But I mean, like, here's a picture of people outside the Stonewall Inn drinking. So she asked me, what do you have? She said, I know you take pictures. So I said, yeah, I've got a lot of stuff. So I sent her all these pictures over the summer, and she picked the pictures. So, I mean, the book is short, so that can kind of fill it out a little bit. It's not a long book. So, but I think it really helps to illustrate what was going on. So I like the pictures. Again, I mean, I could keep writing. It's like it had to end somewhere, and this is where it ended. And I see some more people in the chat room. Is there a gallery view this time? Naomi is great. Yes. I don't know what that question means. Is there a gallery? Is the gallery open?
The gallery is open.
Yes.
Right?
And there's a very nice show here, the holiday show. Last year, there was no holiday show. Holiday show is the group show where anyone from the building can exhibit. It's a very, very good show. It's the Winter Holiday Show 2021. And I'm looking at, they are the publishers. Yeah, Heliotrope Book is the publisher. Yeah. And what else is in the chat here? Okay. I love these last fun events.
Same. I know. I saw in January and February of 2020, I saw a lot of art and a lot of theater. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is so fun. I'm like having a fun month or two. And I felt so lucky about it come March to have, done a lot of things.
Right. Like I remember the last play I saw Oklahoma with my sister, and she had taken me for my birthday, which is in January. And it just so happened that one of my good friends from college, he was playing the lead. Her son was playing Curly on Oklahoma. So of course I had to see it because my sister said, what do you want to see? And I said, oh, well, I got to see Oklahoma because Camille's son is playing the lead. So we saw that and it was great. And I remember like sitting here in my lonely apartment in February and March, looking at the playbill and saying, oh my God, I can't believe Broadway is closed. When will we go back,
Have you been back yet?
No, I haven't, but I'm planning to, yeah. So how about some questions from everybody? I see we still have quite a few people here. I hope the writing didn't scare people off.
I hope not too. I think it's, obviously. I have a degree in writing. I love that. I love that as an activity to just, be able to consider things. Yeah.
The other thing is that, as I said, Westbeth is really like a community. Last June, we had a wonderful ceremony in the courtyard where we honored all the workers. They got a standing ovation, they got a bonus. Everyone felt and still feels that way today, that they went over and above, the call of duty to protect us and keep us safe. And, really, they were putting their lives on the line for us, not just to be in, because, we're here in our apartments. Most of us work remotely, and a lot of people worked in their apartments before, and they had to take the subway every day to come to work, so we really appreciated that and honored them, and still do appreciate that.
Yeah, I know. It's a tough time to be a worker of any kind.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if anyone has last questions, please share them with us. And if not, I think we will call the evening. I'm gonna put.
Thanks for the writing exercise. Okay.
Oh my gosh. I have loved all of this, and I have also read the book, everyone, and I highly, highly recommend it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so wonderful, and I think I think it is really like a very special skill to be able to write in the moment about the thing that is happening right in the moment.
Well, that's really, another thing
really
I just wanted to add. I wrote some of it in the present tense. And I'm one of these people who I never write in the present tense. I'm writing memoir. I always write in the past tense. But like, as you noticed in the first chapter, I wrote the community room is closed. The gallery is dark. I was using present tense, which I never do, but I thought it made sense to keep it in the present tense. And then after I was editing the book, I had some beta readers, of course, who read the whole thing from start to finish. And that was one of the questions I said. Should I throw the whole thing in the past tense? Because some chapters are in the past tense, and they were like, no. Keep that immediacy. Because, as I said, I never do that. But it did seem to work in this case to use the present tense to capture that, right in the middle of it here.
Yeah, the immediacy. I think it really works.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the reading and for telling us all of these great stories and everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so glad, and thank you. Yes.
Thank you for having me. Village Preservation is one of my favorite organizations. I always go to the annual event where you honor all the groups, and I hope one of these days we'll be able to do that again in person.
Yes. We'll see what the next 6 to 8 months holds. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ariel.
Thank you, everyone, so much.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
And buy the book.
Definitely.
Okay, good night, everybody. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.